A woman learned the true shape of power when she discovered who was allowed to ask for mercy and who was punished for asking at all. Arabella had once believed rank could civilize grief, that names carved into silver rings and marriage ledgers could restrain hunger for land, for bloodline, for heirs not yet born. The prevailing order promised law. What it delivered, on nights when ambitious hearts moved behind crests and candles, was theater. Bow at the right threshold, speak the right title, carry proof of lawful bond, and still be treated like smoke, too thin to hold, too easy to wave away. Arabella Frostborn reached the ruined border shrine near midnight with blood drying stiff along her hem, sleet needling the inside of her lungs, and her dead mate's signet tucked beneath her tongue, so no one could steal it from her body if she fell. The stone wolves flanking the shrine had lost their faces to fire years ago, their muzzles cracked, their paws half buried in frozen weeds. She pressed one hand against the nearest plinth to keep herself upright. Her scarred palm burned where old ritual cuts had healed wrong, and her lower back throbbed with the deep, insistent ache of too many miles taken too quickly. The child turned once, low and hard, as if answering the wind. She closed her eyes and saw flames again. 3 nights earlier, men wearing the Moon Court crest had ridden through her husband's outer gate before dawn. Not raiders in mismatched leathers, court steel, court discipline. They killed guards in the yard, put torch to timber, and left the nursery door blackened except for 6 carved words gouged deep enough to survive the smoke. No heir survives the Thornwood claim. She had read that sentence once. Then again, her hand on the doorframe to stop the room from spinning. Then she had run. By the second day, after the keep burned, she reached the Capitol Road with ash still in her hair and soot under her nails. The city walls rose out of fog like a promise she hated herself for trusting. Genevieve Thornwood received petitioners in the outer court that morning beneath a canopy of silver cloth, her fur collar bright against winter stone, royal hounds resting at her feet with jeweled collars and muzzles dark with old stains. Arabella had dropped to one knee because the child needed shelter more than pride needed spine. "Lady Regent," she had said, voice cracking around cold and swallowed metal. "I invoke sanctuary under widow law. My mate was murdered under court insignia. I carry lawful proof and an unborn heir under oath protection." Genevieve had not looked at her face first. She looked at the mud on Arabella's boots, then at the curve of her belly, then at the blood on the hem that no amount of river water had lifted. The court around her went still, not out of respect, but appetite. "Sanctuary is for citizens in good standing," Genevieve said, each word polished smooth. "Not for women who arrive with convenient stories and no escort." "I have his ring?" "Then you had a ring," Genevieve corrected lightly. Past tense is an unkind tutor, but an effective one. A man in court blue laughed under his breath. Another voice somewhere behind Arabella said, "War widow." A second answered, "Court bait." The phrases landed like stones tossed at a stray dog to test how hard it would flinch. Arabella kept her head bowed because if she looked up she would scream, and screaming in that place would be read as confession. "Please, for the child." Genevieve leaned forward just enough for the silver chain at her throat to catch the light. "You should have thought of your child before your house made enemies it could not keep." "My house paid crown tax for 16 years. Then consider this your final contribution." She flicked 2 fingers toward the gate captain. "Deny petition. Search her for forged seals. If she resists, release the hounds." The crux of Arabella's decision arrived in that tiny pause between command and movement, and it was brutally simple. Kneel and lose the signet. The only proof she still held. Submit and be separated from her body by women who served the court that had burned her home. Trust process and vanish inside it. She tasted iron where the ring edge cut her tongue and understood that law, as offered today, was another form of burial. I am still alive. The thought struck sharp and present, not memory but command. I am still alive and he is gone, and this child has no one else. If I stay, they name me liar, then traitor, then nothing at all. If I run, I might die on the road. If I stay, I disappear while breathing. Move. Move now. Do not give them your hands. She rose in one motion and shoved backward into the crowd before the captain could seize her arm. Shouts broke. A woman hissed. Steel rang against stone as guards shoved people aside. Arabella ran blind down the fish market lane, one hand cupping her lower belly, the other clamped over her mouth to keep the ring in place. Behind her, hounds bayed as muzzles came off, deep and eager, and the sound threaded through her ribs like a saw. The city smelled of brine, smoke, and horse sweat. Her boots slid over frozen cabbage leaves, then cobbles, then a spill of lamp oil that sent her shoulder slamming into a wall hard enough to burst stars behind her eyes. She kept moving. A cartman cursed as she ducked beneath his axle. A butcher's boy shouted, "There, there!" pointing with a bloody apron hand. She cut through a chapel yard where old women stared and did not interfere, then vaulted a low chain into the tanner's quarter where runoff turned the alley to black sludge. A hound hit the corner too fast and smashed into stacked hides, buying her 6 breaths. 6 breaths were a kingdom. She ducked into a dye shed reeking of lye and rotten bark, crouched behind vats, and forced herself to breathe through her nose, shallow and silent. Outside, claws scraped wood. A handler whistled once, then twice. Another guard said, "She cannot have gone far. Check the drains." Arabella pressed her fist to her mouth until her teeth ached. The child went still, and terror iced her spine harder than the cold. She waited through 10 heartbeats, then 20, then slipped through a rear hatch into freezing runoff that climbed to her calves. 3 days passed before she stopped hearing those whistles in every windbreak. She moved by night along abandoned service roads, sleeping in culverts and once beneath the collapsed roof of an old granary where moonlight striped the floor like prison bars. Hunger made her hands shake. Fever came and went in hot waves from a scrape on her side she did not remember getting. At dawn on the 4th day, she reached the first frost-born marker stone. Split down the middle, crest gouged out, moss frozen in the crack. Beyond it stretched the shattered territory everyone in the capital called cursed, then forgotten. Burned watchtowers, empty farmsteads, pines bowed under ice. Exiled land, they said, as if land could commit a crime. Arabella spat the signet into her palm only long enough to check it was still there. Frostborn silver, dented, her husband's initials on the inner band, dried blood dark in the engraving. She cleaned it on the lining of her sleeve and tucked it back beneath her tongue when she heard movement in the trees. Not hounds this time, wolves. Large, silent shapes broke from shadow with disciplined spacing. Not feral pursuit, but patrol formation. Men followed in gray and black leathers, bows drawn, fur collars stiff with rime. Their insignia was half burned on their cloaks, yet still recognizable. Frostborn, remade from ruin in stubborn stitches. "Hands where I can see them," the lead scout called. His voice held mountain gravel and exhaustion. "On your knees. Slow." Arabella lifted both hands, fingers spread. "I am Arabella Frostborn by marriage. By marriage to which dead man? Edric Vale Frostborn, keep of Blackwater Reach." Her jaw trembled around the ring. "I seek audience with Griffin Frostborn." The scout's eyes narrowed. "You crossed from Thornwood Roads carrying that name and expected welcome?" "I expected to be killed before I reached your border," she said, too tired to soften it. "Since that did not happen, I will settle for being heard." A younger guard stepped closer, gaze dropping to the swell beneath her torn cloak, then back to her face with something that might have been pity and might have been calculation. "Captain? She could be bait." "She could," the captain said. "Bind her anyway." Rope bit her wrists, not cruelly, just efficiently. As they turned her toward the old fortress road, Arabella looked once over her shoulder at the broken shrine stones and the track she had survived to stand on. The wind rose, carrying pine resin, ash, and distant hearth smoke from somewhere ahead. Not safety. Not yet. But not the court's polished cruelty either. By nightfall, they would drag her into a hall where no one planned to rise for her. The road climbed through pines that crowded close enough to comb frost from her cloak, and every switchback exposed another wound in frost-born land. Roofs collapsed inward like broken chests, field walls split by old fire, watchposts rebuilt in haste with fresh timber lashed to charred beams that had never been fully cut away. They did not hide the damage, they built on top of it. The choice unsettled her more than polished stone ever had. The patrol kept a disciplined distance, 2 in front, 3 behind, one always at her left shoulder, where a quick hand could pull her down if she tried to run. Arabella did not waste strength pretending she might. Her thighs shook with each step. Rope had rubbed the skin raw above her wrists. Once, when she stumbled on black ice, the youngest guard caught her elbow before she hit the ground, then released her immediately as if kindness might be considered dereliction. She swallowed against the ring under her tongue and tasted old silver. The captain noticed. His gaze sharpened. "Spit it out." "It is cracked tooth enamel," she lied. "Then keep your mouth closed before you choke on it." She almost laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. Choking implied a private death. Nothing in the last week had been private. As they crested the final ridge, the fortress revealed itself in pieces. Outer palisade patched with mismatched logs, inner curtain wall half standing, and beyond it a great hall with one restored roofline and another open to the sky where rafters had burned out years before. Lanterns hung from temporary poles, their light swinging in the wind, so shadows moved like restless sentries across stone. Wolves tracked the perimeter in pairs, huge, winter-coated bodies ghosting between rubble and new scaffolding. No chaos, no drunken bravado. Hunger, yes, written in lean faces and ration-thin shoulders, but also order shaped by repetition and consequence. This was not exile in the way the court used the word. This was a nation refusing to die. At the gate, a woman with a scar across her chin looked Arabella over from boots to brow and made no effort to disguise contempt. "That is your spy?" "Claims widow status," the captain said. "Claims audience." "Everyone claims audience when they need our walls." The woman stepped close enough for Arabella to smell pine pitch and steel oil. "Name?" "Arabella Vale Frostborn." "Do not wear that surname in this yard unless the Alpha permits it." The woman jerked her chin at the guards. "Search!" Arabella went still. "No." The woman's expression hardened. "You are bound, half frozen, and in no position to negotiate." "Then bind me tighter," Arabella said, forcing each word through a dry throat. "But no one touches inside my mouth, and no one cuts my clothes." The captain swore softly. "She has something." "Of course she does." The woman signaled 2 sentries. "Take her to the hall. Let the council decide whether she keeps it." They marched her through a courtyard where laborers were stacking winter grain under tarps stamped with old Frostborn runes. Children were absent, which struck Arabella as either good planning or terrible luck. Men with splinted arms hauled stone beside women in heavy aprons, and no one stopped work to stare for long. A few glanced up, read her ropes, read her belly, and looked away with flat caution. The absence of spectacle felt almost merciful. By the time the moon cleared the broken eastern tower, snow had begun again, fine and dry as ground glass. Inside, the great hall smelled of wet wool, wood smoke, and broth stretched too far. The central hearth burned hot, but cold still breathed through cracked masonry and the unrepaired section of roof where stars watched through scaffolding. Tables had been pushed back to make room for a council ring marked in chalk and ash. Elders in layered furs stood near the fire with stewards and quartermasters, all talking low until the guards shoved Arabella into the open. Silence landed hard. No one bowed. No one offered water. Several did exactly what Genevieve's court had done, only rougher. Eyes to mud, to blood-stiff hem, to the shape of late pregnancy as if it were an accusation she carried against the room. "Another petitioner?" an elder muttered. "Thornwood scent on her cloak," said a man near the hearth. "Could be marked." "Could be bait," someone answered from the back. Arabella lifted her chin because bowing had purchased nothing except pursuit. The child pressed against her ribs in a slow, powerful roll that made her suck in air through her nose and lock her knees against the pain. She felt dirty, hunted, and one breath from collapse, but a hard, clean thread of anger ran beneath it all. She had crossed fire and city teeth to stand here. She would not be reduced to a whisper. A door opened on the dais side of the hall. He entered with 2 sentries and no ornament beyond a black fur mantle clasped at one shoulder by plain iron. Griffin Frostborn was taller than Rumor, broad through chest and back, dark hair tied at the nape, jaw shadowed with a dazed neglect that looked less like vanity and more like interruption. He moved like a fighter who had relearned every room after losing one he trusted. Scars crossed one forearm in pale ridges. No crown sat on his head. Authority sat in the way conversation died before he spoke. He crossed to the judgment chair on the dais and sat, facing the ring. The guards straightened at once. Elders inclined their heads. Arabella did not. She could not decide whether she was looking at refuge or another polished blade. The scarred woman stepped forward. "Alpha, Border Patrol intercepted this one crossing from Thornwood Roads. She names herself Arabella Vale Frostborn by marriage to Edric of Blackwater Reach. Refused search. Carries concealed item. Requests audience." Griffin's gaze moved to Arabella, then halted. His first inhale was audible from 10 feet away, sharp as if he had stepped into freezing water. The chair legs scraped stone. Griffin rose first, abrupt, unbidden, before any elder, guard, or sentry had moved. The room changed around that sound, though no one else seemed to understand why. Arabella felt it before thought assembled into meaning. Heat rising from the mark in her palm, racing through her wrist and up her arm in bright pulses, a deep pull beneath her sternum like an unseen cord tightening. The rhythm of her heartbeat catching, then dropping into a cadence that was not hers alone. The ache in her back thinned to a distant edge. Every scent in the hall separated and sharpened. Smoke, leather, lamb broth, pine pitch. And through all of it, one new note struck clean and consuming, storm air over cold stone. No, not now. Not this. The animal part of her went rigid, alert in a way grief had kept numbed for days. Fear and recognition hit together so violently her knees almost gave. She had a dead husband's ring under her tongue and another man's child under her ribs. Whatever this was, it arrived too late, too cruelly timed, too absolute to survive rejection. Do not reach for him. Do not let your face ask. If he refuses you in front of them, you will break where they can see it, and they will call it proof you were weak from the start. Breathe. Stand. Keep the ring. Keep the child. Nothing else is safe. Across the circle, Griffin took one step forward as if pulled by the same chain and stopped, only when his lieutenant touched his sleeve. Amber bled into his irises, not a trick of firelight, but a living flare beneath the human brown predator and man sharing the same stare. His pupils narrowed, widened, narrowed again. He looked at her wrists, at the rope, at the hand she had pressed to her belly, and something harsh crossed his face before he mastered it. "Untie her," he said. An elder bristled. "Alpha, we have not confirmed identity." "Untie her." The words were quiet. The command in them cracked through the hall like split ice. The captain obeyed first, cutting rope with a belt knife. Blood surged back into Arabella's fingers in painful needles. She swayed once, then caught herself. Griffin watched every movement with a concentration that made the rest of the room blur. He had risen before all of them and did not sit again, though every custom required judgment from the chair above her. "Your name," he said, voice roughened at the edges. She worked the signet loose with her tongue, closed her fist around it before anyone else could see, and answered him directly. "Arabella Vale Frostborn, widow of Edric Frostborn of Blackwater Reach." Murmurs rippled. "Edric died 3 nights ago," she continued. "Moon Court insignia on the men who killed him. Nursery marked with threat against the air." Her hand trembled once. She tightened it until the ring edge bit skin. "I sought sanctuary in the capital. Genevieve Thornwood denied petition and released hounds. I crossed your border because there was nowhere left that was not already promised to her." Griffin's jaw flexed. "What concealed item did you refuse to surrender?" Arabella opened her palm. Silver caught firelight, dented and dark in the engraving. Edric's signet. Proof and grief in one small circle. The nearest elder hissed through his teeth. The scarred woman took half a step toward Arabella, then stopped when Griffin lifted 2 fingers without looking away from her. He descended from the dais slowly, each stride deliberate, as if moving too fast might fracture whatever had just happened between them. Up close, she saw exhaustion in him that rank had not erased, fine lines at the corners of his eyes, a healing cut near his collarbone where bandage showed under shirt linen, the stale metallic scent of old adrenaline that clung to commanders who slept in fragments. He halted an arm's length away and lowered himself, not looming over her, not touching, bringing his gaze level with hers despite the watching hall. When he spoke, only she could hear the first sentence. "You are shaking." "So are you," she whispered before caution could stop her. A breath almost became a laugh in his throat, brief and startled, gone at once. His eyes held that amber undertow again, then steadied. Louder for the room, he said. "No one addresses Lady Arabella as spy until I say otherwise. She will be given quarters by the inner hearth, healer assessment, and hot food now." "Lady?" an elder snapped. "On whose authority?" Griffin rose and turned, and the wolf in him surfaced through posture alone. "Mine." The challenge in the room thinned but did not vanish. Arabella felt it like sleet against skin. Dozens of calculations rerouting in real time. Alliances, gossip, ration math, the danger of a pregnant widow linked to their exiled alpha by a bond everyone had just smelled and no one would name first. She should have felt safer. Instead, panic and longing braided tighter in her chest because being seen this clearly was its own peril. Griffin looked back at her, and for one suspended heartbeat the hall, the elders, the ruins, the winter war at their gates all receded. There was only that locked line between them, a pull ancient as oathstone and as intimate as breath. She understood then that survival had changed shape again. Survival had changed shape again, and Arabella did not trust the new outline. Griffin signaled to the scar-chinned officer. "Captain Isolde, inner hearth chamber. 2 guards outside, none inside unless requested. Send Tamsin from the infirmary, and bring broth with salt." He paused, then added without looking at the elders. "And if any counselor has objections, they can wait until morning and voice them to me in full daylight." Isolde's mouth tightened, but she nodded. "As you command." Arabella expected a hand at her elbow, a push between her shoulders, some reminder that protection could convert to custody without warning. Instead, Isolde stepped aside and gestured toward a side passage, waiting for Arabella to move first. Griffin did not follow immediately. He remained in the ring of firelight, absorbing challenges with a stillness that looked patient only from a distance. Up close, it was strain held under iron. The corridor beyond the hall was half restored, stone walls sweating cold, rush torches fixed in mismatched brackets. Arabella walked as steadily as she could until the second turn, when heat slammed behind her eyes and the floor tilted. Isolde caught her before she hit the wall. "Easy," the captain muttered. "You burn like forge metal." "I am fine." "No," Isolde said flatly. "You are stubborn and vertical. Different condition." The room assigned to her had once been a steward's chamber, then a storage alcove, then whatever necessity demanded last winter. A narrow bed stood near a brazier. 2 heavy blankets were folded with military precision. Someone had set a basin of warm water on a stool and a chipped cup beside it. When Tamsin the healer arrived, she brought a leather roll of tools, clean cloth, and the brisk expression of a woman who had no patience for dying people who could be bullied into living. "You have a neck gash gone hot and a side scrape gone angry," Tamsin said after one look. "Did you wrestle a thorn hedge or a kennel?" "Both, probably." Tamsin snorted and began cleaning the wounds with stinging spirits. "Hold still." Arabella held until the heat under her skin broke into shaking. The room blurred at the edges. She remembered the nursery door, the carved words, Edric's hand cooling in hers while smoke blackened the beams above him. She remembered hounds and whistles and river water that never washed enough blood away. When Tamsin spread thick salve across the bite at her neck and wrapped a loose bandage, Arabella barely felt it. She was already drifting, body surrendering by increments her mind had refused for days. She slept hard and wrong, trapped in fever dreams where the Capitol gate never opened, and Genevieve's hounds waited with court ribbons braided into their collars. When she woke, moonlight had shifted to the far wall, and someone was kneeling beside the bed. Her body reacted before thought did. Arabella's hand shot toward the empty stool where no weapon lay, panic rising with brutal clarity. The kneeling figure stopped at once, both hands visible, palms open. "Arabella," Griffin said quietly. "It is me." She focused on his face, then on the strange domestic details that made no sense with the man from the dais. Sleeves rolled, hair loosened from its tie, a strip of linen looped over his fingers to keep salve from sticking. Her hair, unbound and tangled, lay over one shoulder in dark knots. He held the lower section in careful divisions, halfway through a plain braid. "What are you doing?" Her voice cracked. "Trying to keep this from tearing your neck open again." He tilted his chin toward the bandage. "You thrashed in your sleep. The salve catches strands, then pulls." She stared at him. "You could have sent a servant." "I did. You bid him." For one stunned second she could only blink. Then, against grief and exhaustion and all the rigid habits fear had built into her, a ragged laugh escaped her throat. Griffin's mouth moved, almost a smile, and the tightness in the room eased by a fraction. He resumed only when she gave the smallest nod. His fingers were unexpectedly deft, separating snarls without yanking, patient where most people would have cut and been done. He kept his body angled away from her belly, knees on cold stone rather than sitting on the mattress. When the child shifted under the blanket, his gaze dropped reflexively, then lifted to her face. "May I adjust the cover?" he asked. "Only the edge. You look cold." The question landed harder than any command. Arabella swallowed. "Yes." He tucked the blanket along her hip with the same deliberate care, never letting his hand stray. Then he stood, crossed to the table, and set a short dagger in its sheath within easy reach of her right hand. Not hidden, not ceremonial, balanced for immediate use. "If you wake and find anyone in this room you did not permit, use it," he said. She looked from the dagger to him. including you? Especially me, if I forget myself. Silence stretched between them, dense with everything neither of them had chosen, and both of them could feel like weather pressing against bone. The bond still hummed under her skin, less violent than in the hall, but steady. An uninvited current that tracked his nearness with humiliating accuracy. She hated how much relief it gave her. She hated that she wanted to trust it. Inside her, thought turned sharp and present. This is where power usually changes hands. This is the hour when doors lock, and gratitude is demanded as payment. If you relax, you are owned. If you refuse, you are punished for ingratitude. Keep your face blank. Keep your pulse quiet. He is an alpha. Alphas take. They call it duty, need, fate, anything but theft. Yet he is kneeling on stone to braid your hair because it hurts less that way. He asked before touching a blanket. He put steel by your hand and told you to use it on him if needed. What does that mean? Do not confuse gentleness with safety. But do not lie to yourself either. Your body knows the difference between being cornered and being guarded. Right now, for the first time in days, you can breathe to the bottom of your lungs. Griffin broke the silence first. You are not a prisoner here. Words are cheap in halls, she said. His expression did not flinch. Then keep the blade until actions become expensive enough to believe. She searched his face for the performance she had learned to detect at court. The softened mouth, hiding calculation, the lowered tone designed for witnesses beyond the door. She found fatigue, discipline, a strain that looked suspiciously like restraint. Why? She asked, and this time she meant more than the braid, the dagger, the room. He took a breath before answering. Because forced bonds built half the tyrannies we are trying to survive. Because you came here hunted, and I will not become another hunter by calling it fate. His gaze held hers. And because whatever this is between us, you lost your mate 3 nights ago. Grief is not consent. The statement struck clean. No one in power had ever set a boundary aloud for her benefit. He stepped back toward the door and set his hand on the latch. Rest. I will post Isolde until dawn. Griffin. He paused. She did not know which question she intended, only that it mattered. If I ask to leave tomorrow? His jaw tightened once. I would send an escort and supplies to the nearest neutral road. I would hate it. I would still do it. Then, with no flourish, no vow shaped to trap her, he said the words that settled in her chest like a small, stubborn fire. You keep your choices here. He left her with the dagger and the quiet. By the 4th morning after her fever broke, the fortress had resumed its winter rhythm around her. Ration bells at dawn, repair crews at first light, council arguments carried through stone corridors like distant thunder. Arabella had been given provisional quarters near the infirmary and a narrow table for writing statements about the attack on Blackwater Reach. She expected scrutiny. She did not expect the relentless pettiness that came with it. At the midday ration line, she stood with laborers, healers, and widowed sentries, while quartermasters measured grain into marked sacks. Frost drifted from the awning ropes each time the wind shook them. 2 minor nobles from a western holding took position behind her, speaking in voices pitched to carry. War widow, get second ladle now? Not widow, court bait, same trick, softer name. Arabella kept her eyes on the ledger board and counted her breaths. Across the yard, children from the cookhouse carried kindling in pairs under supervision, laughing when one bundle tipped and spilled. The sound steadied her. The line lurched forward. An elder she recognized from the hall stepped from the side aisle and blocked her path. Counselor Varick, narrow shoulders wrapped in expensive sable despite ration rules, looked at the band of healing skin near her neck with open disdain. Still wearing a claim mark no one here witnessed, he said. Convenient. It was witnessed, Arabella answered, By fire and men with your regent's crest. He smiled thinly. Allegations. What I see is a woman who arrives with a swollen belly and a talent for changing alpha priorities. His hand shot out toward her throat, fingers aimed at the healing mark as if he had every right to inspect it like livestock branding. He did not reach her. Griffin moved between them so fast the hem of his mantle snapped. His forearm struck Varric's wrist aside with controlled force, not enough to injure, enough to make the point unmistakable. The yard went silent in one breath, even the kindling children stilled by the sudden shift in pressure. When Griffin spoke, his voice carried to the far wall without rising. "Remove your hand." Varric paled but recovered enough to sneer. "I was verifying a claim on pack resources." "You were reaching for a woman under my protection without consent. Mating fever has made you sentimental, Alpha." The air tightened. Not metaphor. Something old and predatory unfurled from Griffin in a palpable wave, authority sharpened to edge. Men twice Varric's size lowered their eyes on instinct. Wolves pacing the inner wall stopped and looked toward the line, ears forward. Griffin took one step closer. "Hear me clearly, all ranks." His gaze swept the yard, pinning nobles, laborers, guards alike. "Any hand laid on Arabella Frostborn or her child without permission is treason against this pack and against the law I am restoring. Treason will be tried publicly. There will be no second warning." No one moved. Snow hissed against the awning. He turned to Quartermaster Hale by the scales. "Bring the infirmary ledgers. Bring the South Store keys." Hale hesitated, then hurried. Varric found enough breath for one last protest. "You cannot place an unvetted outsider over stores in winter scarcity." "I can," Griffin said. "I just did." Hale returned with 2 ringed keys and a wax-sealed tablet. Griffin took both, faced Arabella, and for the first time since the hall spoke to her, as if the title already fit. "Lady Arabella, by Alpha Decree and Council Code 3, you are appointed Steward Commander of Infirmary Stores, effective now. You will audit intake, approve medical ration dispersal, and report shortages directly to me and Healer Tamsin. Your authority stands in this yard and every corridor attached to the infirmary." He extended the keys. "Will you accept?" The weight of the moment pressed at her ribs. This was not hidden guarding in corridors and midnight kindness. This was public structure, risked in front of people who could make his rebuilding harder. He was tying his authority to hers, where everyone could see the knot. Arabella took the keys. Cold metal bit her palm around the old scar. "I accept," she said. Griffin inclined his head, not a bow, something more deliberate between equals in a war-torn place. Then he looked back to the line. "Rations continue. Counselor Varric, you will submit written apology before evening meal and surrender 1 week of personal grain allotment to Infirmary Reserve for breach of conduct." Varric opened his mouth, met Griffin's gaze, and closed it again. As the line resumed, murmurs shifted from mockery to calculation, then to the practical questions that governed hungry communities: inventory numbers, wound dressings, fever herbs, which families needed broth first. Arabella moved to the side table with Hale and Tamsin, reviewed the ledgers, and began issuing corrections before fear could reclaim her voice. Twice she caught people studying her with the old suspicion. Once she caught Isolde watching with something grudgingly close to respect. When Griffin finally stepped away to answer a patrol runner, Arabella realized her shoulders had dropped from around her ears. The reflex to brace for humiliation did not vanish, but it loosened. Not gone, not healed. Loosened enough for breath. She closed her fingers around the keys and let herself believe, for one careful heartbeat, that lowering her guard might not mean surrender this time. The heartbeat ended when Hale slid a narrow cedar box onto the infirmary table and said, "Special allotment arrived with the noon cart, marked for you by name." Arabella frowned. Nothing in Frostborn moved fast enough for gifts, and certainly not for her. The box was too polished for frontier trade, corners banded in tin etched with moonvine filigree she recognized from capital apothecaries. A folded note sat beneath the latch, sealed with plain wax impressed by a sprig of lavender, the sign trusted midwives used when they traveled between packs. Her pulse stumbled. Tamsin saw it too. "Do not open that yet." Arabella touched the note anyway. The handwriting on the outer fold was familiar, round and practical, from years of household records at Blackwater Reach. Midwife Katrin. Katrin, who had wrapped Arabella's sprained wrist after a stairfall 2 winters ago, and scolded Edric for letting her carry grain sacks. Katrin, who smelled of thyme and wool, and always had honey lozenges hidden in her sleeve. She broke the seal with a thumbnail and read, "For your strength in late term, 1 spoon at dawn and 1 at dusk. You must keep your blood warm in hardship. Take with broth, not tea. By court order, this shipment is protected passage. I am delayed at the river crossing and will follow within 3 days. Katrine Vale." No affectionate sign-off. No private mark she always added at the bottom of personal notes, a tiny stitched star. Arabella read it a second time and felt the old court chill crawl back under her skin. "Court order," Tamsin said, voice going thin with contempt. "How generous." Griffin returned from the patrol runner before Arabella answered. He took in the box, her face, Tamsin's set jaw, and went still in that precise way she had learned meant calculation, not calm. "What is it?" "Prenatal tonic," Tamsin said. "From a midwife. Arabella knows. Routed through court protection." "Do you trust it?" Griffin asked Arabella. She wanted to say yes because Katrin's name sat on the paper, because trusting one thing from the old world would have felt like finding a surviving beam in a burned house. Instead, she heard herself answer, "I trust Katrin. I do not trust the road between her and me." Tamsin uncorked the bottle. The scent rose sweet and wrong, berry syrup over a bitter metallic undertone that did not belong in restorative blends. She dipped a silver probe from her roll into the liquid and held it above the light. The tip stained dark in a spreading bruise of color. Hale swore under his breath. Isolde, who had come in behind Griffin, reached for the bottle with 2 fingers as if handling lamp oil. "Not enough to kill quickly," she said after a careful sniff. "Enough to weaken. Fever, confusion, shaking spells, in a crowded hall that looks like guilt or hysteria." Arabella stared at the note until the letters blurred. Genevieve did not need her dead if she could make her unstable, untrustworthy, unfit to stand in public. Court cruelty with polished nails. Nothing messy. Everything deniable. Griffin spoke without raising his voice. "Seal it in evidence wax. Chain of custody starts now. Hale, log arrival time, carrier, cart mark, and every hand that touched this box." He looked at Isolde. "Find the driver." "Already in holding," Isolde said. "He claims he picked it up at the lower ferry from a court quartermaster." "Keep him warm and fed anyway. Fear at its memory." Griffin's gaze shifted back to Arabella. "Any other messages?" As if summoned by the question, a second runner burst through the ration yard arch with snow on his lashes and a leather packet strapped beneath his coat. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving. "Border post from East Hollow. 3 packs posted this at their meeting stones by order of the Moon Court." Isolde took the packet, snapped the cord, and handed the top document to Griffin. Arabella watched color drain from his face by degrees she could barely perceive. He passed her the page. It was a lineage decree, written in formal court hand and stamped with the regent seal in heavy black wax. By authority of Genevieve Thornwood, acting Crown Regent, the unborn child carried by Arabella Vale was declared outside lawful succession due to unresolved suspicion of maternal conspiracy in the death of Edric Frostborn. Until adjudication, The mother was to be held without title, her testimony restricted, her assets frozen, and any pack giving her military or ceremonial standing fined in grain and steel. Below it sat two scribe signatures Arabella recognized from tax season ledgers. Both names had certified her as probable co-conspirator. The yard noise dimmed around her. No one shouted. No one needed to. Hunger made people practical, and this paper attacked with arithmetic. Grain fines could cripple half the holds that still traded with Frostborn. By the third evening after her appointment, copies of the decree had reached 6 neighboring territories, each delivered with an offer of winter relief if they affirmed witness statements against her. The line on the document that mattered most was short enough to miss on first read. Testimony accepted by oath proxy, no appearance required. Genevieve was buying voices from far away so Arabella could not face them. Council convened before night meal in the cracked great hall. Smoke rose straight from the hearth, trapped beneath new rafters and old resentment. Varric argued first, because men like him always scented weather shifts early. "We cannot ignore the grain penalties," he said, palms spread in theatrical reason. "Call this what it is, Alpha, a legal containment order. If we keep her in command, we invite sanction on every mouth in this fortress." Arabella stood at the lower rail with Tamsin and Isolde, back rigid, hands clasped to hide the tremor she despised. She expected Griffin to answer with rank and volume. He did neither. "This decree alleges conspiracy," he said. "On what evidence?" Varric lifted his chin. "Court-certified scribes." "Bribed scribes are still scribes," muttered another elder. Griffin's stare cut across the circle. "Then we verify. Isolde, dispatch riders to both signatories and the ferry quartermaster named by our driver. Secure statements under local seal before dawn if possible, by noon if not. Tamsin, preserve the tonic for assay and witness examination. Hale, duplicate our infirmary logs and lock originals." Varric gave a brittle laugh. "You plan to outpaper the court. I plan to outtruth it." Griffin turned toward Arabella. "And we do nothing about her without her standing in this room." That sentence should have eased her. Instead, it tightened the knot behind her ribs because being included meant being visible, and visibility had been weaponized against her for days. Yet when he met her eyes, there was no pity in him, only fierce attention and an invitation she could refuse. Inside her mind, fear and longing collided and would not separate. "I am so tired of being tested by rooms full of hungry people pretending procedure is mercy. I am tired of proving I am real to men who have never had their names taken from them. I want to lean toward him when he looks at me like that, and I hate wanting anything I cannot control. If I trust this bond and he falls, I lose twice. If I deny it, I carve myself smaller until Genevieve wins without drawing a blade. Breathe. Feel the child move. Feel the keys in your pocket. You are not standing at the Capitol gate now. You are standing where your voice has already altered a ledger. Hold that. Hold yourself." When the council broke, snow had begun again, tapping the unrepaired section of roof like patient fingers. Griffin found her in the records alcove behind the hall, where shelves of rescued ledgers leaned against fresh timber bracing. A single oil lamp burned between them. The bond hummed low and steady, warmer than the room. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." He gave a tired half-smile. "I have less excuse." She held up the decree. "Do you believe any of this?" "No." "That was too fast." "It was exactly fast enough." He stepped closer, not touching, close enough that she could see the faint silver in the scar near his collarbone where stitching had healed. "I believe a woman who crossed half a ruined territory to protect a child while carrying proof under her tongue. I believe a regent who denied sanctuary and then sent hounds. The rest is theater." Arabella looked down because the steadiness in him threatened to undo her. The theater works. Papers travel farther than I can. Then we make the stage smaller, he said. Keep this fight where witnesses can smell lies burn. The phrase lodged in her. Old law. Moon oath. Public answer. Dangerous and clean. A knock sounded at the alcove door, and Isolde entered with a travel-stained rider at her shoulder. Message from East Hollow return line, she said. One scribe admitted payment, not in writing yet, but the rider heard him offer to recant if given safe passage. Second scribe has gone missing from his post. Arabella exhaled slowly. One crack in Genevieve's frame, not enough to break it. Any word on midwife Katrin? She asked. Isolde's expression shifted, minute but unmistakable. Yes. Fairy ledger shows she never boarded. A woman using her travel token collected court supplies 2 days ago and rode west under guard. We are still confirming identity. The room felt suddenly narrower. Genevieve had reached into Arabella's past and worn a trusted face like a glove. By dawn the next day, rumor outran fact. In the lower kitchens, Arabella heard herself called the pity bond in one corner and the regent's trap in another. In the infirmary, 2 junior aides asked for transfer rather than answer to her authority, until Tamsin assigned them latrine boiling duty for insubordination. At noon, a boarder matron arrived to inspect records, then confessed in private that her pack had been promised 3 grain wagons if she signed a statement that Arabella had admitted infidelity at Blackwater. The matron left without signing, but she left with empty carts. Pressure built like ice in a river bend, silent until it cracked. It cracked at moonrise. The outer horn sounded once, then twice, formal arrival pattern, not attack. Isolde came hard down the infirmary corridor, cloak flung back, eyes bright with the kind of fury that carried bad news wrapped in protocol. Great Hall, she said. Now. Arabella went with her, one hand braced at the small of her back as another tightening band of pain crossed her abdomen and eased. Not labor, Tamsin had told her earlier, only strain and stress, but the sensation left her breath shorter each time it came. By the time she reached the hall doors, soldiers in royal blue already lined the central aisle in mirrored ranks, boots clean despite the mud outside. Genevieve Thornwood stood at the foot of the dais as if she had always belonged there. Silver collar immaculate, dark hair pinned beneath a crescent clasp. She had brought 3 court scribes, 2 heralds, and a cleric carrying a lacquered case bound in red ribbon. Behind them waited wagons stamped with grain marks, visible through the open doors like a promise and a threat in the same frame. Griffin stood on the first dais step, shoulders square, no mantle, only black leathers and iron at his throat. He looked like a drawn bow. Genevieve turned when Arabella entered, and her smile sharpened by half a degree. Lady Arabella, she said, making the title sound like mockery wrapped in silk. How fortunate. We can proceed without delay. One herald unrolled a parchment and began reading in ceremonial cadence. By order of the Regent Court, Alpha Griffin Frostborn was offered immediate alliance marriage to Lady Eleanor Ashford for restoration of trade protections and revocation of sanctions. Contingent terms required public refusal of unvetted bond claims and formal stripping of Arabella Vale's provisional status pending tribunal transfer to the capital. Murmurs spread through the hall. Not chaos. Calculation. Genevieve lifted her hand for silence and addressed Griffin, but her eyes stayed on Arabella. Accept the contract and your people eat before deep winter. Refuse, and every pack that shelters this woman shares her penalties. We can perform the severance rite tonight, quick, respectful, lawful. Another tightening band gripped Arabella, deeper this time. She kept her face composed and tasted metal where she had bitten the inside of her cheek. Around her, Frostborn sentries shifted weight toward their weapons while royal guards did the same. One spark, and the hall would turn into a slaughterhouse of alliances. Griffin did not move. You forged evidence. Genevieve's smile held. Prove it before your stores run dry. The cleric with the red ribbon case stepped forward and opened it. Inside lay a ceremonial chain of office and a black wax seal for title suspension. Critical was not a feeling. It was a room full of witnesses, soldiers, and starving calculations waiting to see whether Arabella would bow, break, or burn. The cleric lifted the chain of office as if preparing a blessing. Two royal guards stepped off the aisle at the same moment, angled toward her with practiced neutrality that felt more dangerous than open threat. Isolde moved first from the Frostborn's side, hand on her sword, and the nearest sentries followed, boots scraping stone in a sharp, echoing chorus. "Hold!" Griffin said, the command striking both lines like a hammer blow. No one fully obeyed. The royal guard stopped only a pace from Arabella, close enough that she could smell lamp oil on their leather and see the tiny nick in one man's gauntlet where steel had recently met steel. Genevieve did not look at them. She looked at Arabella with that same tailored smile. "Lady Arabella," Genevieve said softly, "submit to suspension, and this remains dignified. Refuse, and you force these people into consequences you cannot feed." A pulse of pain tightened across Arabella's lower abdomen and released, leaving her breath thinner. Tamsin appeared at her shoulder, voice low and urgent. "You need to step back. Now." Another guard reached. Not rough yet, fingers opening toward Arabella's forearm in a gesture so familiar it nearly made her shake with rage. Inspection disguised as procedure, seizure disguised as law. Griffin descended one step, and the pressure in the room surged toward violence. Arabella heard herself say, "Do not." Both men stopped, Griffin included, because the word had not been fear. It had been decision. She drew the short dagger from her belt, the one he had left within her reach nights ago, and every soldier in the hall shifted stance. Arabella ignored them. She walked past the cleric, past the red ribbon case, and up the cracked edge of the dais toward the old Frostborn throne where ancestral runes lay split by fire damage and years of neglect. Dust and ash filmed the carved lines. No one had tried to restore them. No one had dared pretend old law still breathed there. Genevieve's voice sharpened. "Disarm her." Isolde stepped into the aisle, sword fully unsheathed, and answered without taking her eyes off the royal line. "Try." Arabella faced the hall. Her hand trembled once, then steadied. "Under Frostborn covenant," she said, forcing each syllable to carry, "I invoke the right of witness. Blood offered, memory summoned, no rank overrules, no witness removed." Varric blanched. One elder whispered a curse. The cleric with the chain lowered it by instinct, his own training colliding with older law. Genevieve laughed once, thin and bright. That right died with the old throne. "Then let it stay dead," Arabella said, "if I lie." She turned the dagger and sliced her palm along the old scar, pain clean and immediate. Blood welled dark, then brighter, and she pressed her hand to the fractured runes. For a suspended beat, nothing happened. Then the carvings drank. Silver light ran through the broken channels in abrupt, branching lines, filling cracks, leaping stone seams, climbing the throne base like frost racing across a window pane. The hall's torches dipped and flared. A wind with no source moved through the rafters, carrying smoke sideways. Wolves outside answered with one long, uneasy call. The light lifted from the runes and unfolded into images in the air above the hearth. Not illusion haze, but hard-edged memory. Blackwater Reach at dawn, gate chains dropping, men in Mooncourt livery riding through flame and splintered timber. A nursery door scorched black, 6 words carved into it with methodical force. "No heir survives the Thornwood claim." Gasps tore across the hall. The memory shifted. A fairy landing. A woman wearing midwife Katrine's token accepting a sealed crate from a court quartermaster. The wax mark on the crate matched the cedar box now locked in infirmary evidence. The quartermaster handed over a folded order slip stamped with Genevieve's private sign. Genevieve stepped back, just one pace, then caught herself. Forgery tricks. Frostborn glamour. Arabella pulled her bleeding hand from the stone and held it up for all to see. Then challenged the right under oath, here, in front of everyone you tried to buy. Silence crashed down harder than shouting. By the time the last echo died, no one in the room still believed this could be settled by parchment alone. Within the same hour, the great hall floor had been cleared of tables, and the moon oath brazier was carried to the center ring. They built the trial in a circle of witnesses because that was the point. No private chambers, no edited account, no courier rewriting what happened after the fact. Elders stood to one side, royal guards to the other, frostborn sentries at every arch. The cleric, pale now, read the oath terms with a dry mouth and shaking fingers. Genevieve refused the first wording, then the second. Arguing jurisdiction. Arabella stayed standing through another tightening wave of pain, one hand at the curve of her belly, the other wrapped in clean linen Tamsin had tied so tight her pulse throbbed in her fingertips. Griffin remained 3 paces behind her, close enough that she could feel the steady force of him, far enough that no one could call her shielded. "I am afraid," she thought, the words bright and exact in her skull. "I am afraid of the pain, of the child coming early, of this fire choosing truth that still leaves me with ashes. But fear is no longer the only thing in me. I crossed a city that wanted me gone. I stood up bleeding and called law by its oldest name. Let them hear me now." Isolde entered the ring with a small iron token stamped by East Hollow notary seal. "Statement marker from Scribe Pell," she announced. "He confessed payment to certify false conspiracy before witnesses at dawn. Requests protection for full testimony." A murmur rolled through both ranks. External rumor had become admissible fact. Genevieve's jaw hardened. A bought coward seeking pardon. Arabella took the token and lifted it beside Edric's signet, silver ring in one hand, iron confession in the other. Grief and proof. Past and present. "You built your case on signatures," she said. "Now one signature has confessed, and another vanished when writers asked questions. You sent poison under a trusted name. You brought chains and called them dignity. Swear innocence then. Let Moonfire decide what paper cannot." The cleric nodded weakly toward Genevieve. "Regent Genevieve Thornwood, place your hand over the flame and state your oath." Genevieve walked to the brazier with perfect posture, every inch the court she had ruled by appetite and arithmetic. She held her palm above the blue-white fire and spoke clearly. "By moon and crown, I am innocent of the murder at Blackwater Reach, innocent of false writ against Arabella Frostborn, innocent of any attempt against her unborn child. I acted only within law for realm stability." The fire surged, not upward in clean light, but outward in a dark flare that swallowed color for a heartbeat. Black tongues of oath flame coiled around Genevieve's wrists, climbed to her forearms and sank into skin in branching marks like scorched vinework. She screamed then, not from bodily ruin but from truth made visible, and tore her hands away too late. The hall erupted. Royal guards shouted denial. Frostborn sentries slammed spear butts to stone and advanced one rank. Varric dropped to one knee, forehead slick with sweat. The cleric staggered backward, voice cracking. "Perjury witnessed. Oath violation confirmed. By covenant, title forfeit is mandatory." Genevieve clutched her branded arms and spat toward Arabella. "You were never meant to be seen." Arabella stepped forward despite the pain cinching hard around her middle, despite Tamsin reaching and missing her sleeve, despite every instinct that begged her to sit and breathe and let someone stronger carry the rest. She faced Genevieve squarely and answered with her whole voice. "Then watch me be chosen." She raised Edric's signet for the hall. This is lawful proof of my marriage and the heir you targeted. She raised the iron token. This is your paid lie already cracking. She turned to the elders. I file formal charge under moon oath, orchestrated murder under false insignia, attempted poisoning, falsified lineage decree, coercion by grain sanction. I demand sentence now, in witness. No one could pretend ambiguity after that. Elder Meron, oldest surviving covenant keeper, stepped into the ring and spoke the verdict each line required, stripped of ornament. Genevieve Thornwood, by witnessed perjury and corroborated conspiracy, you are removed from regent standing, deprived of title, seal, and claim right. You are sentenced to iron exile beyond pack borders. No court shelter, no oath seat, no command over grain, guard, or writ. Royal blue tabards stiffened, then sank as their own captain read the room and lowered his sword. Isolde moved with two frostborn guards, snapped iron restraints around Genevieve's wrists, and took the regent seal from her belt. The red ribbon marriage contract was thrown into the oath brazier, where it curled black and vanished. Genevieve twisted once toward Griffin, desperation finally cracking her polish. You chain me for her, and doom your alliances. Griffin's expression did not change. I chain you for what you chose. He took the restraint lead himself. By the time the outer gate opened to the night, snow had thickened into hard white sheets, and the same arch where Arabella had once been denied shelter stood crowded with witnesses who needed to see consequence made real. Griffin walked Genevieve through that threshold in irons while heralds recorded every word of sentence. No one cheered. The moment was too grave for triumph noise, but no one challenged it either. When the gate shut again, the sound rolled through stone like a final bell. Arabella swayed. Tamsin caught her this time, firm and unyielding. You are done fighting for tonight, the healer said, one hand checking the tightness of Arabella's abdomen, the other already signaling for hot water and blankets. You won. Now you breathe. Arabella let herself lean, just for that step, as the hall behind her began the long work of rewriting law in the space where fear had ruled. Arabella let Tamsin guide her down the side corridor, one hand braced under her elbow, the other pressed to the hard curve of her belly, while the tightening pain eased into a dull, manageable band. The fortress had not gone quiet after the sentence, only redirected into work. Witnesses signing oath records, guards changing chain of custody, clerks sealing evidence with trembling wax. Through an arrow slit she saw torchlight moving toward the archive tower, where Hale had already carried the cedar box, the false tonic order, the lineage decree, and the iron confession token together under triple lock. Each item logged by time, hand, and seal. At the sanctuary stones behind the hall, wind skimmed low over snow, and old carved pillars leaned toward one another like elders in council. Moonlight silvered the fractures in the altar slab where frostborn rites had survived fire, neglect, and bad rulers. Tamsin checked Arabella again, listened, waited, then nodded. Not labor yet. Stress and strain. You need warmth, water, and calm. Her stern gaze softened by a degree. If you choose a bond right tonight, you do it sitting between waves, and you stop when I say stop. Understood. By the time Tamsin left for hot cloths, Griffin had returned from the gate with snow on his shoulders and iron dust on his gloves. He stripped the gloves off before crossing the last step, as if even that small roughness mattered. For a long moment they only looked at each other, breath visible between them, the bond a low, steady thrum now that the hall's fury had burned off. I should ask tomorrow, he said first, voice rough. After sleep. After food. Arabella shook her head. Tomorrow I will think myself out of every true thing. He came closer, then stopped where she could refuse with one word. Then I ask now, and you answer only what you mean. Arabella, do you want this bond claimed in full with me? The question landed clean, without pressure wrapped around it. She felt fear, grief, longing, all of it still present, and beneath it a clarity she had earned the hard way. Yes. He did not move yet. Do you consent to my mark on your neck and shoulder, witnessed by moon and law? Yes. A faint tremor ran through him. If you need me to stop at any point, I stop. Do you still consent? She stepped into his reach and took his hand, guiding it first to her heartbeat, then lower where the child shifted under her palm. Yes. I choose you. His eyes closed briefly at that, and when he opened them, amber lit through the dark. He eased them both down onto folded blankets beside the altar, keeping her supported against his chest so her back could rest. He waded through one more tightening wave in her abdomen, rubbing slow circles at her spine until her breathing steadied. Tell me what you need, he murmured. No suddenness, no force. Talk to me. I will. She tipped her head, exposing the healed line at the junction of neck and shoulder. Griffin cupped her jaw with one hand, thumb resting near her ear, and lowered his mouth to her skin in a pause that was almost prayer. The first pressure of his teeth was precise, controlled. Pain flashed bright, sharp enough to pull a sound from her throat, then transformed as the bond opened fully. Heat poured through the bite, not burning but flooding, racing down her spine and out through her limbs in pulsing waves that dissolved the clench in her muscles. The ache in her abdomen loosened. The old fear lodged behind her ribs cracked and drained like thaw water. She clutched his sleeve, breathing hard. Griffin. I have you, he said against her skin, voice shaking now. Mine. The words should have frightened her. Instead, inside this chosen moment, it felt like shelter freely entered, not walls forced closed. She turned toward him, while the golden-silver current moved between them, saw his throat exposed where his pulse beat hard. Your turn, she whispered. He stilled, searching her face. You are sure? Yes. She touched the hollow below his jaw. Yours. When she bit him over the pulse mark, she did it with the same deliberate care he had given her. His breath broke on a low sound, and his hands tightened at her waist, then gentled instantly. Power surged through the bond again, deeper now, reciprocal and settling. Her grief no longer a solitary weight, his vigilance no longer a closed fortress. She felt memories brush without full images, emotional truths carried in sensation rather than words. His years of rebuilding on scant supplies, her nights running from whistles and teeth, his fury at seeing rope on her wrists, her terror at being unseen, not erased, shared, held. Mate, he said, forehead to hers, mate. They stayed like that while moonlight shifted across the stones, breath sinking, the child giving one strong kick beneath their joined hands as if voting on the arrangement. Griffin laughed once, stunned and reverent, then pressed a kiss to her brow. No one stands alone in my name again, he whispered. Arabella's throat tightened. Then stand with me until the end of all winters. By dawn, Isolde had posted the final trial outcomes on the hall board in plain script no herald could distort. Scribe Pell arrived under escort and repeated his confession before council and common ranks, naming payment dates and witnesses. The second missing scribe was found alive in a Thornwood Way station cellar by Frostborn riders and 2 East Hollow wardens. He corroborated the forged decree process in exchange for lawful censure instead of exile. Midwife Katrine reached the fortress that same night with bruised wrists and fury bright in her eyes, having escaped the men who stole her travel token. She testified to the attempted impersonation, then took one look at Arabella and Griffin's fresh marks and said, with dry authority, "Good. At least one thing in this month was done with consent." When the public claiming ceremony convened in the Great Hall 2 days later, the cracked roofline was draped with winter branches and oath lanterns. Griffin stopped at the base of the dais and refused to ascend until Arabella was seated beside him on the restored twin chairs. The gesture traveled through the room before words did. Elder Marin struck his staff once. "Bow to Frostborn Luna Regent," he called, "lawful mate to the Alpha, lawful mother of the protected heir." This time the hall moved as one. Nobles, sentries, laborers, counselors, even Varric with his written apology pinned to the record rail and his forfeited grain already transferred, all bent first to her. The memory of that first night returned with knife-edge clarity, no one rising for a mud-streaked stranger. Now rising for her was custom, not exception. Arabella stood to read the first Reconstruction Accord herself. Genevieve's bribery routes were converted into shared winter treaties audited by 3-pack ledgers, so no single regent could starve a border hold into false testimony again. Infirmary Command expanded into a permanent civilian office under her seal. Widow law was amended line by line. Sanctuary petitions required public hearing, never private dismissal. No claimant could be searched without witnessed cause. Unborn heirs could not be stripped by proxy writ. Hale logged each ratified clause. Isolde took command of mixed patrols under the new codes. Tamsin chaired the Health Council and destroyed every remaining vial tied to the poison recipe under formal record. When proceedings ended, Griffin offered his hand in full view of everyone and Arabella took it, their bond marks visible, their joined grip steady. He did not speak over her when petitioners approached. He listened while she answered. Under the next full moon, in the same sanctuary stones where they had marked one another, Arabella went into true labor with Tamsin and Katrin on either side, and Griffin at her shoulder, counting breaths exactly as instructed. Their son arrived with a fierce cry and a shock of dark hair, healthy and furious at the cold, before he settled against Arabella's chest. Moonlight touched his brow. No threat followed, no carved message. Only the sound of relieved laughter breaking in waves outside the chamber door. Near sunrise, Griffin sat beside her on the bed, their child sleeping between them, and traced one careful finger near the mark at her neck without touching it. "Mine," he said softly, then glanced at the infant and corrected himself with a smile that changed his whole face. "Ours." Arabella rested her head against him, tired to the bone and utterly at peace. "Yours," she answered. "Mate." In the restored great hall, where fresh beams crossed old stone and winter grain filled every store bay, people rose when she entered before she ever reached the dais. They rose because law had changed, because memory had been witnessed, because power had finally been taught to kneel where it once devoured. At her side, Griffin rose with them, and together they ruled a pack that no longer mistook cruelty for order.